I got to a point in London where what I wanted was space. We specialise in and we're known for producing everything in camera. Film, obviously, before it was pre-digital. And so the studio was full of bits of wire and things hanging off stands and black velvet to hide other stuff. From the side looked completely mad, but from the camera you couldn't see any of the wires and you couldn't see, it was like a magician's set. They kind of did feel like a performance. We were shooting for good clients with really good creative directors, etc. And it was great, I loved it. It was a slightly mad lifestyle in that as the studio became busier, then I was hardly at home at all. I had toys and stuff, but not the time to play with them. And if you weren't busy, the machine needed so much money to keep it going, needed feeding all the time. So you ended up worrying about that. So one day in February, about 15 years ago, I was in the studio, the rain was hitting the roof, it was cold outside. Claire was in Soho, she was my agent. She was tramping from one agency to the next with my portfolio. It wasn't a nice day for either of us. But on the radio there was a book that was being dramatised. And this is the kind of cliche part of the whole thing, but it's true. And it was a book about this guy that had left the city and moved to Spain and had lived this rural life with a goat and without electricity and water, etc., all this kind of stuff. And it was kind of this romantic thing, kind of ideal of the good life. And it just seemed so far away from where we were that day and so nice. Anyway, so Claire drove back to the studio. She was listening to it as well in the car, which I didn't know. And anyway, we started talking about it. And within minutes, we kind of both sort of said, well, why don't we go and do that? That sounds fun, let's change our life dramatically. We pretty much sold everything we had because we wanted to go with very little, really. It was a cleaning process, mentally as well as physically. So that day, Claire and I started to talk a lot about the idea of the good life and having a totally different lifestyle to the city life that we had, and the idea of having more time to do the things you want to do, even if you have a lot less money and you have a lot less stuff. We had a lot of stuff that you didn't really need and didn't really use a lot of it, but you kind of had it because everyone else had it. It was almost like you were playing a game and you needed to have this because then you'd look like you were doing well and all that. And I was finished with that. And life now is, on a practical day-to-day basis, is much more difficult. Without electricity, having to pump your water up and all that. But it's fine. It's something that you get used to. So it's now been nearly 15 years that we've been in Spain, and we've done stuff that we would never have done had we stayed in London. We've learned to speak Spanish, something which I never thought I'd do. We've had people teach us how to breed rabbits and skin them, etc. One day, Angel, who's our local goat herder, is shouting up the hill for me to come down, and one of his donkeys had fallen down this bank with his legs sticking up in the air. We eventually managed to turn the donkey over without getting kicked. And then a couple of days later, he dropped by with 10 litres of olive oil and that he'd made himself, etc. And it was lovely, and it was nice to be able to help. It was good to be able to help. I was looking at all these lovely still lives of real flowers that Mapplethorpe and Penn had shot, and I thought it would be interesting to do that with artificial flowers. Here in Spain you see them in cemeteries. You're in a place where everybody's dead, and artificial flowers don't die. Flowers themselves, they are as delicate as anything can be, and they have a short life and they die. Artificial flowers kind of almost represent a permanence. The latest piece is a circle suspended around a tree trunk. And in a lot of ways it harks back to the time when we were in the studio and we were creating everything in camera. And so I'm trying to do the same thing, but in nature. The circle really is there and it really is suspended. It's not a series of other images all put together eventually into one final digital image. It's a sculpture in its own right, and that's important for me in the work that I do, is that there is a physical presence to it. I love spending hours at night in a field, lighting individual flowers, painting them how I want them to look. And I'm never alone. There's always a horse that will come in, steal a couple of flowers, 2 or 3 cats that will come and climb the tree. There's a dog that will knock the camera over, and it's fun, it's part of it. But I still love going to London, I still love working in advertising, and I love that contrast, and it's getting that balance of being in each place for the amount of time that is necessary and that you want. I think we all want to try and find the right balance between what we need to do and what we love doing. And I think that search can be an adventure in itself. I'm still searching, but I'm closer than ever.